J.D. Vance destroyed Tim Walz in the first and only vice presidential debate. Democrats had a lot of work to do as Kamala Harris continues to slip behind in the polls, with Trump surging in the swing states. Walz did not get what he needed to do done, and this puts him and the vice president in a very precarious position as we enter the final month of the campaign. And in this video, I'll be updating my 2024 electoral map to show you how the math has changed for both Harris and Trump following the debate. We'll begin by filling in the solid states for both candidates. These are states where either Harris or Trump are going to win by 15 percentage points or more. The vice president is going to easily carry Washington, California, Hawaii, as well as Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, and the District of Columbia, along with the 1st District of Maine. This gives her just 109 electoral votes. While for Trump, he is going to win Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, Alaska, and the 2nd District of Maine, along with Iowa, a state he won in both 2016 and 2020 by a nearly double-digit margin. And so with these safe states filled in for both candidates, Donald Trump takes an early lead with 132 electoral votes. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz at just 109. Vance's strong performance last night is definitely going to help out the GOP in winning Iowa by the largest margin they've won it by since the 1980s. Now, for the likely states, these are races in which either candidate will win by 7 to 15 points. They are going to be noticeably more competitive, but one candidate will still maintain a slight edge. And so starting off with the likely blue states, we have Oregon and Illinois, two states that went to Joe Biden by solid margins back in 2020. He won Oregon by 16 points, Illinois by 17. Kamala Harris simply isn't going to perform as well as the incumbent president. And then up in the Northeast, we have New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Democrats have really been struggling, especially in New York and New Jersey. I mean, in New York, their leaders have just been plagued by scandal. First, in 2022, we had the resignation of Andrew Cuomo as governor, and then Kathy Hochul wasn't any more popular. Her first lieutenant governor resigned due to scandal, and then just a few days ago, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who is, of course, a Democrat, was indicted on charges of corruption. And so really this has tanked support for Democrats in the Empire State. Bob Menendez in New Jersey isn't helping them out either. And so these three traditionally blue states, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware, are going to be a lot more competitive than they were 4 years ago when Joe Biden won all three of them by 15 percentage points or more. And finally, we have Colorado, a state that Biden won by nearly 14 points in the last election. I'm going to give Harris the benefit of the doubt. I have her winning Colorado by just over 7 points, so it's barely going to be a likely blue state. But at this point, Colorado is still relatively liberal. It will be quite difficult for Trump to make too many inroads there. However, he will definitely do much better than he did in 2020. Now it's time for the likely red states, states that Trump is going to win by 7 percentage points or more. We're going to begin with Ohio, a state that he won in both of the last two elections. He actually flipped it back in 2016. Before this, I went to Obama by 3 points in 2012. And then in 2020, everybody thought Ohio was going to be a lot more competitive. Polls showed that he was going to win it by just 1%. But in the end, Trump carried the Buckeye State by an 8-point margin. He's going to win it by a double-digit margin this time around. There's no doubt Ohio is likely red. And then down in Texas, we have another state that was thought to be very competitive in 2020, despite it not having gone blue since 1976. People thought Joe Biden could actually pull off a victory in the Lone Star State, but that was never going to happen. Trump eventually won it by 6 points. Not really the best margin. He won it by 9 in 2016, but against Kamala Harris this November, the former president is on track to win Texas by 10 percentage points or more. Before we continue, nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the description below. And then the last likely state on this map is going to be Florida. Just 4 years ago, Florida was among the most competitive states in the country. Polls had Joe Biden winning by 2 to 3 points. He eventually lost it by that margin, which came as a pretty big surprise. He did worse than Hillary Clinton 4 years prior. And today, Florida is no longer in play. It isn't considered a battleground. It's not a swing state. It's not even remotely competitive. Donald Trump is going to win by 7 to 10 points. We saw in 2022, Governor Ron DeSantis got reelected by a 20-point margin. The race in Florida is going to be more competitive on the presidential level, but there's no doubt Republicans are going to win it for a third time in a row, with Trump at the top of the ticket. So Florida will be the final likely red state going to Trump. And so with both the solid and likely states now filled in for both candidates, the former president continues to lead with 219 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 191. Trump is now just 51 electoral votes away from the presidency. We're now left with 12 states. These are going to be the lean and tilt states, the most competitive states on the map. Together, they're worth 128 electoral votes, less than a quarter of the Electoral College, but they really do wield all the power. It is in these states where the election is won or lost, especially key states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia. So we're going to start off with the lean blue states for Harris. First state she's going to win by 2 to 7 points. And we're going to begin up in the Northeast with New Hampshire and Maine. She's probably going to win these states by the midpoint of Clinton and Biden's margins from 8 and 4 years ago. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won New Hampshire by 0.37. She won Maine by 2.9. Joe Biden did a little better. He won New Hampshire by 7.4, Maine by 9.1. Kamala Harris is probably going to win both of these states by around 4 to 6 points. She is definitely favored, but these are not going to be impressive victories by any means. Moving on down to New Mexico, this is a state that Democrats have not lost since 2004. Joe Biden actually won it by a double-digit margin in 2020, but Democrats really aren't going to do too much better in New Mexico in the coming decades. They're probably going to lose it in less than 20 years as the Hispanic vote continues to shift to the right, and New Mexico is the only state in the country with a majority Hispanic electorate. They really are starting to favor Trump and the GOP more and more, and so that is why I have it as a lean blue state. Kamala Harris, believe it or not, is doing much worse with minority voters than Biden was in 2020. She's basically performing on par with Hillary Clinton and her performance with minority voters from 2016, which is a really bad sign because minority voters make up a huge block of the Democratic coalition. And so New Mexico being lean blue is not a good sign for the vice president in a state that Biden carried by 11 points in the last election. And now for the lean Trump states, we have quite a few of them, many of them in the Sun Belt. I'm going to begin with Arizona, which has quickly become the most conservative of the 8 swing states. I also include Virginia as one of those toss-ups, and we might even start to include Minnesota after this point. But Arizona, out of all the states left, is probably going to go to Trump by the largest margin. He's been absolutely dominating in the polls there. He's led in all 10 of the last 10 polls conducted in the state. His odds in Arizona, according to the betting markets, are higher than his odds in both North Carolina and Georgia. And so a state that Biden won in the last election, Kamala Harris is almost certain to lose it this time around. Arizona is going to be lean red, with the former president on track to win by around 3 to 4 points. And then moving out east, we have North Carolina, the only swing state that's gone to Trump in both 2016 and 2020. He won it by 4 points 8 years ago, and then 4 years ago, he won the state by just over 1%. But this was a really good surprise for Republicans because basically all the polling said that they were going to lose the Tar Heel state entirely, but somehow Trump came out with a victory. And so today, he's on track to win North Carolina for a third time in a row. He's dominating the polls just like in Arizona, but Mark Robinson is not going to help Trump here. He's probably going to pull him down, but Trump has done very well in North Carolina in the 2 elections he's running already, and he's going to do well once again. I see him winning by around 3 percentage points. Next up in Georgia, this was the most competitive state in 2020. It was decided by the smallest margin. Just 0.24% of the electorate separated the incumbent president and the former president, but But today, there's no doubt Trump is on track to win Georgia back. Biden's victory here in 2020 was the first for any Democrat since 1992. Kamala Harris is not going to make history again. She simply isn't performing nearly as well as Biden was in the last election. In 2016, Trump actually won the Peach State by 5 points, so Georgia still is a fundamentally red state, and so it's going to go back into the GOP column this time around. And what we're seeing is that North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, these three states are slowly becoming more and more reliable for Trump. He can basically count on all three of these states' electoral votes, which means that out of the remaining states, with the exception of Nevada, he only needs to win one more to clinch the presidency. And that state is probably going to be Pennsylvania. The Keystone State has been noted by basically everyone as being the most important state for both sides. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, he gets to over 270. And the reason why it's Pennsylvania is because, yes, Trump can definitely win states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, maybe even Virginia. But if he wins these states, he's already going to have won Pennsylvania by a larger margin. So in terms of the states that are necessary for him to win the White House, Pennsylvania is probably going to be the one that gets Trump over 270 electoral votes. He's retaken the lead in the polling averages, and he's definitely favored to win back the Keystone State. He won it by 0.72 in 2016. This was a very close margin. This was the first time a Republican won Pennsylvania in 24 years. And then in 2020, he lost it narrowly to Joe Biden by just over 1%. And today, he's going to win it back again. Pennsylvania is going to flip-flop back to the GOP, with Kamala Harris performing much worse than Biden and Clinton were in the polling at this point in 2020 and 2016. We have one final lean state, and that will be Wisconsin. After that disaster of a debate for Walz, he's going to hurt Harris now in Wisconsin. For a while, people thought Pennsylvania would vote to the right of Wisconsin just because Walz was going to give the vice president a boost in Wisconsin, as he is the governor of Minnesota, and the two states share a pretty long border. But at this point, it doesn't seem like Walz is helping out Harris too much. Trump is going to win Wisconsin by a lean margin. He's going to carry it by just over 2 points. In fact, Trump has done very well in Wisconsin in the last two election cycles. He won it by 0.76% in 2016, but then when he lost it in 2020, he was supposed to lose the state by 8 points. He lost it by just 0.6. Polling today shows a tie between Trump and Harris, which is a very good sign for the Trump campaign. And even when Biden won in 2020, he only won the state by 0.6, a smaller margin than Trump's from 4 years prior. And now we're left with just 4 states. These are going to be tilt states decided by 2 percentage points or less. I'm going to get the 2nd district of Nebraska out of the way first. It is going to be tilt blue. But then out in Nevada, this is a state that Trump can flip. It's a state he's never won before, as no Republican has carried Nevada since George W. Bush in 2004. But today, Nevada is shifting to the right. In 2016, Hillary Clinton carried the state by 2.4%. Joe Biden won it by the exact same margin in 2020 when he improved off of Clinton's margin in basically every other state. There were only 5 states where Biden did worse than Clinton. And in 2022, Republicans won the governorship here. Another clear sign that Nevada is shifting in favor of the GOP. And so this November, Trump has a very good chance at winning the state for the first time as a Republican in 20 years. And then the final state to go to the former president is going to be the Wolverine state of Michigan, a state he won back in 2016 against Hillary Clinton by a 0.2% margin. He lost it to Biden by 2.8, but he's on track to win it back this time around. Polling severely underestimated support for Trump in Michigan 4 years ago. He was supposed to lose the state by 7 points. He eventually lost it by less than 3, and today the polls in Michigan are basically a tie, just like they are in Wisconsin. And when the polls are tied, you can be pretty confident that Trump is going to come out on top. And so the Michigan is going to be the final red state on the map. It's going to be tilt in favor of the former president. And now we're left with both Minnesota and Virginia. Virginia has always been very competitive this election cycle. Before Joe Biden dropped out, he was on track to lose the state entirely based on the polling average. And today, Kamala Harris isn't really doing that much better. Many polls have her leading by just 3 points. But considering Joe Biden carried the state by 10 points in the last election, I still do see Harris squeaking out a narrow victory. And then in Minnesota, Tim Walz's performance is not going to help him too much in the state. Minnesota is always going to be competitive. If Walz wasn't the Democratic vice presidential nominee, there's a very good chance Trump would currently be favored in the state. But Walz is still the governor. He's still going to give Harris a boost, but definitely not as much as he was going to give her number before this debate. And so Minnesota, the last state on the map, is going to be tilted blue. It's going to be just as competitive as it was in 2016 when Hillary Clinton pulled out a 1.5% victory. Nobody thought it was going to get that close. And so following the first and probably only Vance-Walz debate, Trump is at 312 electoral votes, Harris at just 226. Trump is making gains in Wisconsin while Minnesota becomes more and more competitive. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now